The cry in the trees. The forest was cold and quiet. Raylan moved slowly through the thick trees, his boots soft on the mossy ground. He was a hunter, used to silence. But today the silence felt strange. It wasn't peaceful. It was heavy. Like something was watching him. He held his old rifle close, eyes scanning for any sign of the animal he had been tracking. A large creature had left claw marks near his cabin the night before. Something wild, something dangerous. Then, he heard it. A soft sound. It wasn't a growl. Not the call of a bird. Not the scream of a beast. It was crying. A child's cry. Raylan froze. His heart skipped. No one lived this deep in the forest. The planet was mostly wild. Just a few scattered humans and even fewer visitors. He crouched low, moving carefully toward the sound. The cry came again, closer now. As he pushed aside a branch, his eyes widened. Beneath the roots of a twisted tree, huddled in a small space, was a child. Thin, shivering, not human. The skin was pale blue, almost glowing. Eyes large and full of fear. The child had no clothes, only a torn cloth wrapped around its small body. It looked no older than 5. Raylan slowly lowered his weapon and raised his hands. "Hey," he said gently. "It's okay. I won't hurt you." The child stared at him, eyes wide. Then, without warning, it turned and ran. "Wait," Raylan called out, following quickly. He didn't want to lose the child. Something was wrong. Very wrong. The small feet left light prints in the mud, leading him through thick trees and over a shallow stream. The cry came again, not from the child now, but from someone else. A woman. Raylan stopped behind a bush, breathing hard. In the clearing ahead, he saw her. She lay on the ground, barely moving. Her body was thin, bones pressing through the skin. She was the same blue color as the child. Her clothes were ripped and soaked. Mud covered her legs. Her chest moved, barely. The child was by her side now, holding her hand and sobbing. Raylan stepped out slowly. The child saw him and moved protectively in front of the woman. "I'm not your enemy," Raylan said, gently placing his rifle on the ground. "I just want to help." The woman opened her eyes. Her voice was soft, broken. "Please, my daughter." Raylan knelt beside her. Her forehead was burning with fever. She was weak, too weak to move. "How long have you two been here?" he asked. She didn't answer. Her eyes fluttered shut again. Raylan looked at the child. "Can you walk?" he asked her. The girl nodded slowly. "Good. I'm going to carry your mother. We need to get her warm." With effort, Raylan lifted the woman into his arms. She was so light, like she hadn't eaten in days. The child walked beside him, holding onto his jacket tightly. The walk back to the cabin took nearly half an hour. All the way, Raylan stayed alert. Something still didn't feel right. Why were they out here? Who left them? When they reached the cabin, Raylan quickly made a fire. He placed the woman on his small bed, wrapped her in blankets, and gave the child some warm soup from a metal pot. She ate slowly, watching him with wide eyes. "What's your name?" he asked. The girl didn't answer. He tried again, pointing to himself. "I'm Raylan, you?" She looked down, then whispered, "Tali." "Okay, Tali. Your mom needs to rest, but she'll be okay." He hoped that was true. She was burning with fever and her body was weak. As night fell, the cabin grew quiet. Tali sat by her mother, holding her hand. Raylan checked the door. Locked. It then added more wood to the fire. Outside, the wind howled through the trees, and in that wind, Raylan thought he heard something else. A distant voice, a laugh, a whisper. He stepped outside with his rifle, scanning the dark woods. No one was there, but something was watching. Something that didn't want the woman and child to be saved. Raylan looked back at the warm light coming from his cabin. He had just stepped into something bigger than a simple hunt, and he wasn't going to walk away. Shelter or trap, The cabin was warm, but the air inside felt heavy. Raylan checked the fire again. Flames danced softly, casting golden light across the wooden walls. The alien woman still slept on his bed, her skin pale, her breath slow. The little girl, Tali, sat beside her mother, refusing to sleep. Raylan handed the child a wool blanket. "She's safe now," he said, trying to offer comfort. "You are too." Tali didn't speak. She only looked at him with those large silver eyes, silent, scared, but curious. Raylan pulled up a chair beside the window and stared out. The forest outside was dark, and the wind moved the trees like ghosts dancing in the night. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. In the early hours of morning, just before dawn, the alien woman stirred. Raylan rushed to her side as her eyes opened slowly. "Water," she whispered. He helped her drink. Her hands were trembling. "I'm Raylan," he said. "You and your daughter were freezing out there. What happened?" The woman looked around, confused. Then panic entered her eyes. "My daughter?" "She's right here," Raylan said. Tali reached out and touched her mother's hand. The woman closed her eyes in relief. After a long pause, she spoke in a quiet, broken voice. "My name is Sira." "Why were you in the woods?" Raylan asked gently. Sira looked away. Her eyes filled with fear. "We were left there," she said slowly. "They didn't want us anymore." Raylan felt his stomach tighten. "Who are they?" Sira didn't answer, but she pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders. Then she whispered, "They're coming." Raylan stayed quiet for a moment. He didn't ask more questions. Instead, he got up, walked to the corner of the cabin and opened a small metal case. Inside were extra rounds for his rifle, a knife, and a few tools. He checked the windows, locked the door, and made sure the traps outside hadn't been triggered. Sira watched him with tired eyes. "You believe me?" she asked. Raylan nodded. "I've hunted enough to know when something's following a trail." He didn't tell her what he saw last night. The flicker of movement just outside the tree line. The sound of branches snapping far too close. Midday, Sira sat up with help. Raylan gave her broth and helped clean a scratch on her arm. As he did, he noticed something strange. On her back, just under the shoulder, was a burned mark. A brand. A symbol. Raylan froze. He had seen that mark once before, years ago, during a conflict near the outer colonies. It was the ownership symbol of a powerful alien house known for trading slaves. His voice lowered. "They branded you." Sira nodded slowly, her voice shaky. "I was sold, years ago. My mate died protecting me. Then they took my child and me. But we escaped." "Into the forest?" Raylan asked. "No," she said. "They threw us into it. Told us we were used up. Worthless." Raylan stood silently. He looked at Tali, who was now asleep beside the fire. "You're not worthless," he said. Sira's eyes softened for a moment. Then suddenly they widened in terror. "Raylan," she whispered, pointing toward the window. Raylan turned. Outside, across the clearing, half hidden behind a tree, stood a tall figure, covered in dark armor, watching them. Then, in a flash, the figure disappeared into the trees. Raylan grabbed his rifle and burst through the door. "Stay inside," he shouted. He ran to the edge of the trees, heart pounding, eyes scanning, but the figure was gone. Only silence. He returned to the cabin, locking the door behind him. "They found us," Sira said softly. Raylan's jaw tightened. "Let them come." That night, Raylan stayed awake with his gun in his hands. He sat near the window while Sira and Tali rested. But every now and then, he heard it, branches snapping, leaves rustling, a shadow moving. He didn't know how many were out there. But he knew they weren't animals, and they weren't going to stop. The mark on her back, Raylan moved carefully around the cabin as the morning light broke through the forest. The fire had burned low. The air was cold again, but inside, there was still some warmth, just enough for the two survivors he had taken. Insira sat up against the wall now. Her face was tired, but she was stronger than yesterday. Tali was asleep in her mother's lap, wrapped in Raylan's thick coat like a little blue bundle. Raylan poured water into a small bowl and carried it to Sira. She tried to smile but couldn't. He sat beside her. "I saw the mark on your back," he said gently. Sira looked away. "I know what it means," Raylan continued. "You belong to someone." "No," she said, her voice shaking. "We never belonged to them. We were taken. Used." Raylan nodded. "I won't ask for details, but I need to know. Who are they? The people chasing you?" Sira was quiet for a long moment, then she said 2 words. "Bone merchants." Raylan's eyes narrowed. He'd heard the name before in low whispers. A secret group that didn't just trade slaves. They sold rare, exotic beings. They used the weak and discarded them like trash. "They deal in life like it's scrap," Sira added. "My kind was rare. My daughter even more so." Raylan looked at Tali, still peacefully sleeping. "She's just a kid." "To them," Sira said bitterly, "she's money." Raylan stood and stepped to the window. The forest outside looked quiet again, but the silence felt fake. Too perfect. "They're tracking you," he said. Sira nodded slowly. "They never stop. They hunt with scent, sound, and eyes you never see." Raylan turned to her. "Then we make a stand." "No," she said quickly, fear rising in her voice. "You don't understand. These people, they don't leave survivors." Raylan walked to a hidden panel in the wall and pulled it open. Inside were grenades, smoke bombs, an old communicator, and a hunting knife with a plasma edge. "I didn't survive 3 wars just to run from cowards in armor," he said firmly. Sira stared at him confused. "You're a soldier?" "Was," he replied. "Now I just hunt things with 4 legs. Looks like I need to go back to hunting monsters with 2. That evening, Raylan built traps around the cabin, tripwires, noise alarms, and camouflaged pits. He moved like a man who had done this 100 times before, because he had. Inside, Sira cleaned the wound on her arm. Raylan helped her wrap it in clean cloth. That's when she turned slightly, and the light from the fire revealed more. Raylan saw them, scars, small ones, deep ones, marks of a collar, of chains, of pain. His jaw clenched. "How long were you a prisoner?" 3 years, Sira said, but it felt like a lifetime. Raylan didn't speak, but something changed in his eyes. A quiet rage, not loud, not wild, just cold and focused. Later that night, as the moon, Tali woke up crying. Sira held her close, singing softly in her alien tongue, a lullaby with broken notes and trembling lips. Raylan sat in silence, watching them. A mother and her daughter, left to die in a forest like animals, now being hunted again just for surviving. He had seen many things in his life, but this was unforgivable. A sudden sound snapped him back. Snap. A twig. Outside. Raylan stood up and raised his hand for silence. Sira held Tali tightly. He moved to the window, rifle ready. Then he saw it. A tall figure moving silently between trees, watching. Raylan opened the door and stepped outside. "You're not welcome here," he shouted. The figure didn't answer. It only raised a finger and pointed toward the cabin. Raylan's grip tightened. "Come closer and I'll bury you in this dirt," he warned. The figure stepped back into the trees, vanishing into the shadows. Raylan returned inside, locking the door behind him. "They're testing us," he said, "trying to see how scared we are." "They won't wait long," Sira whispered. "Once night falls again, they'll come for real." Raylan sat down by the fire, loading his weapon carefully. "Let them come." His eyes were calm, but his voice was steel. They have no idea what kind of human they just messed with. The hunter becomes hunted. It was still dark when Raylan opened his eyes. Something felt off. The fire had died down to glowing embers, and the cold had returned to the cabin. Sierra was asleep on the bed, curled protectively around her daughter. No, wait. Only. Sierra was there. Raylan sat up fast. His sharp eyes scanned the room. "Tali?" he whispered. No answer. He rushed to the door, heart pounding. It was slightly open. Just an inch. He had locked it last night, he was sure. He stepped outside barefoot, rifle in hand. The forest was quiet. Too quiet. No birds, no wind. No morning sounds. Just silence. Then from the left a soft whimper. Raylan ran. The footprints were small. Bare feet in the dew-covered grass. Tali had walked out on her own. Or had she? Then another set of tracks appeared. Bigger, heavy, booted. Raylan's stomach turned. Someone had taken her. He followed fast, ducking low under branches, stepping over roots and across mud. The path led toward the fog-covered side of the forest, a place hunters avoided. The marshlands dark, cold, and always watching. Raylan didn't hesitate. Back at the cabin, Sierra woke to find Tali gone. She screamed, her cries were sharp, cutting, the air like a blade. She fell to the floor, shaking, searching every corner of the cabin. Her child, her only child, missing, gone. Tears blurred her vision, but she forced herself up. Her legs were weak, but her spirit screamed louder than her pain. She stumbled to the door, and there on the step was a small folded leaf. Inside the leaf was a tiny strand of silver hair. Tali's hair. Sierra knew what this was. A message. In the marsh. Raylan kept moving. The fog was thick, clinging to his face and clothes. Every few steps something snapped underfoot. Branches, bones, or both. Then he heard it. A high-pitched voice crying softly. It was Tali. He pushed forward faster. Then he saw her, hanging in a net between two trees. Alive. But crying and tangled. Raylan raised his rifle. "Hang on, kid," he whispered. Suddenly a voice behind him spoke. "Too late, human." Raylan turned fast. An alien slaver stood there, tall and wrapped in black armor. A face-covering mask hid its features, but its voice was full of cruelty. "She's not yours. She was never yours." Raylan didn't reply. He just pulled the trigger. The shot hit the slaver's shoulder. It stumbled back, screaming in a language Raylan didn't care to understand. From the trees, two more slavers appeared. One charged. Raylan rolled to the side, swung his rifle like a club, and knocked the attacker's leg from under him. The second lunged, but Raylan pulled a knife from his belt and sliced across its arm. Tali screamed in fear from the net. Raylan shot the rope. She fell, but into his arms. "Got you," he said softly. He ran, child in his arms, heart racing. Blaster, shots fired behind him. One hit a tree just inches from his head. Another hit the ground and sent sparks flying. Raylan reached a rock ledge, ducked behind it, and pulled out a smoke grenade from his belt. With one flick, he tossed it behind them. Smoke exploded through the trees. Cover. He ran again, through fog and smoke, until the forest turned familiar. The cabin was close. Sierra stood just outside the door, a metal rod in her hand. When she saw them, she gasped and ran forward. "Tali!" Raylan handed the girl to her mother. "She's safe now," he said between breaths. "But they're not far behind." Sierra looked into his eyes, her own filled with rage. "Then we end this." Raylan nodded. "We're not the hunted anymore." They placed Tali safely in a hidden spot inside the cabin, wrapped her tight and told her not to move no matter what. Then Raylan and Sierra stood side by side, weapons in hand. Raylan looked at her. "You sure you can fight?" Sierra lifted the metal rod. "I've been running too long. I'd rather die on my feet than crawl one more day." Raylan smiled. "That's the spirit." Outside, shadows moved through the trees. The slavers were coming. But this time, they wouldn't be hunting prey. They'd be facing something much worse, a human, and a mother with nothing left to lose. The price of mercy. The air was still. too still. Raylan stood just outside the cabin, one knee bent, rifle against his shoulder. His eyes scanned the trees. Behind him, Sierra crouched low, gripping the metal rod like it was part of her arm. She was silent, her jaw tight. Tali hid inside the cabin, buried under blankets and floorboards. No one spoke. Then, a sharp whistle echoed from the trees. Raylan didn't move. Another whistle replied from the left. Sierra whispered, "They're spreading out." Raylan nodded once. "Let them." He had prepared the forest like a game board. And the slavers were stepping right into it. 3 dark figures crept between the trees. Slavers. Masks over their faces, cloaks over their backs. Each carried a stun weapon shaped like a whip and wore armor laced with trophies, bones, claws, and pieces of collars. The leader stepped forward, holding something high. It was a small doll, Tali's doll. "I know you can hear me, human." The slaver called out. Raylan didn't answer. "You have what belongs to us. Return them now, and we'll make your death quick." Raylan let out a slow breath. "You hear that?" he said to Sierra. She didn't answer. Her eyes were locked on the doll. Her lips trembled. "I remember that doll," she whispered. "Tali made it from rags when we had nothing." Raylan's voice turned cold. "Then they just made it personal." He stood and stepped into the open, rifle aimed straight. "I'm the one you want," he said loudly. "The woman and the child are under my protection." The slavers chuckled. "The child is rare," the leader said. "We could sell her for a year's profit. And the mother? We'll let her scream again, like before." Raylan's fingers squeezed the trigger halfway. "You just bought your own pain." The slaver raised his weapon. But Raylan moved first. Bang. The leader dropped, a hole between his eyes. The other 2 ducked behind trees, but the first step one took landed on a wire. Snap, a metal trap shot upward, catching the slaver by the leg, and yanking him upside down into the air. He screamed. Raylan turned to the third. The slaver tried to run, only to trip over a hidden pit covered in leaves. He fell hard into it, breaking something as he hit the bottom. Silence. Sierra stepped forward, her face pale. Raylan walked to the slaver caught in the trap. The alien thrashed and cursed in its language. "I'll kill you, tear your bones." Raylan pressed the barrel of his gun against the slaver's forehead. "Say another word," he said calmly. The alien froze. Raylan looked over his shoulder at Sierra. "What do you want to do with him?" he asked. Sierra stared. This was one of the slavers who dragged her by her hair, who struck her when she begged for food, who threw her into the forest like trash. She stepped closer. Her hands shook, but then she stopped. Tears filled her eyes. "I want him gone," she whispered. "But not like this, not with my child watching." Raylan lowered the gun. Mercy, a choice Sierra had never been given. But now, she gave it. Raylan tied the slaver up and dragged him to a tree, leaving him hanging upside down with a gag in his mouth. As the sun rose, the cabin returned to silence. The danger was gone, for now. Inside, Tali peeked out from her hiding spot. She saw her mother. "Mama?" Sierra ran to her and wrapped her in her arms. "It's over," she whispered. "You're safe." Raylan leaned against the door, tired but still alert. Sierra looked at him. "Why did you help us? You didn't have to." Raylan shrugged. "No one helped my sister when she needed it. I wasn't going to let it happen again." Sierra placed a hand on his shoulder. "You gave us a chance to live." Raylan looked into her eyes. "No," he said. "You took that chance yourself. I just stood beside you." That night they sat by the fire together, Sierra, Tali, and Raylan. One small family that wasn't a family. Not yet. But something was building. Trust. Safety. Hope. And behind all of that was fire. Not just from the logs, but from the human who refused to walk away. The bond forged in fire, the forest was still. For the first time in days, no footsteps hunted them, no shadows watched from the trees. just the soft crackle of firewood inside the cabin and the slow breathing of those who had survived something cruel. Raylan sat beside the fire, patching up a tear in his jacket. His arm was bandaged where a blade had scraped him, but he didn't complain. Across from him, Sira carefully brushed dirt and dried blood from her daughter's skin. Tali had finally fallen asleep, safe in her mother's arms. The room was warm, but the quiet was strange. Raylan broke it with a question. "You ever seen snow?" Sira blinked. "What?" He smiled faintly. "My home planet has snow half the year. It's cold, soft, and beautiful, but deadly if you're alone." Sira tilted, her head. "Like this forest." Raylan nodded. "Maybe worse." She looked down at her hands. Thin fingers. Worn skin. So many scars. "I don't remember the last time someone spoke to me like this," she whispered. Raylan didn't interrupt. "I was taken from my village when I was barely older than Tali. Sold, resold, punished for speaking, punished for crying. Every kind word was fake, a trap." Raylan's voice was soft. "This one isn't." She looked up at him, surprised. "I'm not here because I want something," he said. "I'm here because no one deserves what was done to you." Sira's eyes shimmered, but she didn't cry. She had cried too much in her life. Now the tears just sat quietly behind her gaze. Later that night, Raylan prepared food. Not much, just dried meat and some root stew, but enough to feed 3. He set the bowl in front of her. She looked at it, hesitating. Raylan didn't push. Instead, he sat on the floor and slowly began to eat his own. After a few quiet moments, Sira picked up the spoon. "Tali hasn't eaten like this in months," she said. "Not since before they locked us up." Raylan looked at the sleeping girl. Her small chest rose and fell in a calm rhythm. "She's safe now," he said. Sira nodded, but her voice was heavy. "For now. But they don't stop, Raylan. Bone merchants never forget. We humiliated them, they'll come with more." "I know," Raylan said. "Then why aren't you afraid?" Raylan looked into the fire. "Because I've already decided. I don't run anymore." The next day, Sira stepped outside for the first time. Raylan was sharpening a blade by the woodpile when he saw her. She was barefoot, standing in the grass, letting the breeze touch her skin. Her eyes were closed. Her arms hung loose by her sides. Raylan said nothing. He just watched. Finally, she spoke. "I forgot what wind feels like." He stood and walked over slowly. "Would you like to learn something new?" Sira opened her eyes. "Like what?" Raylan handed her the blade. "How to fight." She blinked. "Why me?" "Because next time," Raylan said, "we may not have time to talk first, and I don't want you to ever feel helpless again." Sira stared at the blade in her hand. Then, slowly, she nodded. For the next few days, they trained. Simple things. First, grip, stance, movement, then blocking, defending, striking. Raylan never yelled, never judged, only showed her again and again until her hands stopped trembling and her eyes stopped looking away, and every day she grew stronger, not just in her body, in her heart. One night after Tali had gone to sleep, Raylan and Sira sat outside on a log. The stars above the forest sparkled like cold fire. Sira broke the silence. "I used to dream of a life like this. Not the cabin, not the woods, just sitting next to someone without chains on my wrists." Raylan looked at her quietly. "You're not in chains anymore?" Sira turned her head, their eyes met. "No," she said softly. "I'm not." She reached out and gently took his hand. For a moment, nothing was said, but everything was understood. The next morning, they found something outside the cabin, a symbol carved into a tree, the bone merchant's mark. Raylan ran his fingers over it, fresh. They were coming again, stronger this time. He looked back at the cabin, at Sira, at Tali. Then he whispered to himself, "Let them try." A new home, a new name. The storm came without rain, no thunder, no wind, just footsteps. Dozens of them. Raylan watched from the trees, his breathing calm, his rifle loaded. They had come as he expected. More slavers, better armed, wearing black armor, and cruel smiles. They spread across the clearing like a pack of wolves. But this time, he was ready. In the cabin, Sierra stood tall. No longer just a survivor. No longer the frightened woman he'd carried out of the woods. She wore armor Raylan had stitched from scavenged gear. Her grip on the blade was steady. Beside her, little Tali sat hidden in a trap door beneath the floor, holding her doll close and whispering softly, "Mama will protect me. The human will protect us." The sun hung low, turning the forest gold. The trap had been set. One of the slavers stepped forward, dragging a long blade behind him. "Raylan," he called out, voice rough like gravel. "Come out, human. It's your last chance." Raylan answered with silence. Another slaver laughed. "He thinks this is his land, that he can keep property from us." Inside the trees, Raylan smiled. Boom. The first explosion knocked 2 slavers off their feet. Raylan's traps had begun. Spikes launched from a hidden log. A net dropped from the trees and tangled 3 attackers. Panic followed. Raylan stepped out behind them, silent as a ghost. One by one, he took them down. Rifle shots, knife swings, smoke grenades. Sierra burst from the cabin like fire. Her blade caught one slaver's side. Another tried to tackle her, but she flipped him with raw force Raylan had taught her. This wasn't a rescue, it was a war. Minutes passed like hours. Blood stained the grass. Smoke filled the air. The last slaver fell with a scream, tackled by Raylan and slammed into the mud. Breathing heavy, Raylan stood in the center of the clearing. Sierra joined him, her face bruised, her hands shaking, but her eyes burning with life. "It's over," she said, her voice barely a whisper. Raylan looked around. The bone merchants wouldn't be back, not after this. That night, silence returned to the forest, but it was a different kind of silence, one earned through fire and pain. A peaceful one. Raylan buried the weapons deep and cleaned the blood from the ground. Sierra bandaged his arm, her fingers gentle now, confident. Inside the cabin, Tali climbed out from her hiding place and ran into her mother's arms. "I knew you'd win," she whispered. Sierra kissed her daughter's forehead. "Because I had help." Raylan sat beside the fire, wrapping a fresh cloth over a cut. Tali walked to him shyly. "Are you going to leave now?" Raylan looked at her. "No. Not unless you want me to." She shook her head quickly. "Stay. Please stay." Sierra sat beside him, her voice soft. "We'd like you to stay, Raylan." He looked at them both, their eyes, their wounds, their strength, and he nodded once. "I think I already have." Weeks passed. The forest healed. So did they. Raylan built a larger cabin, with rooms instead of one, a small fence, a garden, even a water filter. He taught Sierra how to use human tools. Sierra taught him how to cook her people's food. Tali learned how to laugh again. One morning, a message drone flew overhead. Raylan shot it down before it could scan the area. The world beyond still hunted people like them. So they stayed hidden. But they weren't hiding. They were living. One quiet evening, Sierra stood with Raylan beneath the stars. Tali slept nearby, clutching her doll, now stitched with a little patch shaped like a heart. Sierra turned to Raylan. "You never asked." "Asked what?" he replied. She smiled. "What my real name is." He blinked. "Sierra isn't real?" She shook her head. "That was the name they gave me in the cages. A number, really. I chose it later, to survive." Raylan stood quiet. "My real name is Niari. It means light after storm in my old tongue." Raylan said it slowly. "Niari." She nodded. "And Tali," she added, "means hope." He looked at the sky. That fits. She stepped closer to him. We want you to have a name too. Not just as our protector, but as family. Raylan turned to her. His voice almost caught. What name? Nyari smiled. Father. In the wildest part of the galaxy. In a forest. No one mapped. A man who had hunted beasts found something else. A new home. A new name. And two lives that would never again be alone.